We spend a lot of time talking about how Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are in a really nascent stage, really, really early in the life cycle. And so a lot of the things that you would expect to exist, in fact, don't, because nobody's bothered to make them yet. So in the last couple of weeks, I've gotten to know a few different guys and their projects, and I wanted to take the opportunity to sort of start talking about this. The topic broadly I'm calling push button Bitcoin. It's these devices that provide an interface between real world stuff and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency broadly speaking. So there are a couple of projects. The first one is Morgan Rockwell out of, I think he's in Vancouver. He's working on a Bitcoin washing machine, but it's not just about a washing machine. Essentially what he's designed, again, is this interface that essentially you send Bitcoin to. It has a little screen and has an address that it gives you, and it tells you how much to send. And then once that amount has been received that's appropriate for whatever it's trying to do, then it presses a button, and it can press a button for a set length of time if there's something that only operates while it's being pressed, or it can basically activate things. So he envisions using it in laundromats where there are no dollars, there is no change that needs to have armored cars come and pick it up. Instead, you just go to the laundromat, you send your fraction of a Bitcoin to it, and there you go. It turns on, and you've got your solution there.
Quick explanation, because as a non-American, I have to tell you, a laundromat is a very American thing.
Oh.
A laundromat is a commercial establishment full of washing machines and dryers where you can go if you don't have one in your home, and you can deposit money to wash and dry your clothes. Doesn't exist everywhere, just letting you know.
I actually had no idea. I have never used a laundromat, but I did not know they were a U.S. phenomenon.
I haven't either, but I have used in apartment complexes. Sometimes they'll have a pay machine that's like just for the building.
Yes, and in other places, especially in Europe at least, it was only in student dorms that you would find that kind of thing. But yeah, still, even in student dorms, I think that's a great application for vending machines and student services and laundry.
Getting those rolls of quarters was the worst.
Exactly.
Well, and it's also bad for the business owner, too, because then they have to take all those rolls of quarters that people have spent with them and somehow get them to a bank, which means that you can be robbed. I mean, again, there are like all of these things that add to the cost of doing business that if you don't have tangible money that can actually be stolen from your establishment, it sort of fixes that problem. And to a lesser extent, this is also true of one of the other areas that Morgan's looking at with this project, parking meters, where, you park. And then again, I think that this is not just US. So correct me if I'm wrong here. You put in a couple of coins into the parking meter, and then you have a set amount of time. And again, the problem is that these machines can break, and they have mechanisms, where things can get stuck, and they can be stolen, because they can just be cut off and you can take the whole thing with you. But with Bitcoin, again, there's nothing to take. So there are advantages there.
And all of these are examples of payment systems that primarily operate with coins, so small denomination payments. If they do operate with notes, that's relatively rare, and most of these don't have credit card machines. And the primary reason is, of course, the cost of the transactional fee that goes with each of these. So it's a perfect niche for Bitcoin, isn't it?
Once you get to a place of adoption, it is. But again, you have like this chicken egg problem where it almost doesn't make sense to develop it until you've got the market, but you can't have the market until you've developed the application. So, I think that projects like Morgan is undertaking are really important because, yes, they're speculative, but they're foundational. I mean, these are technologies. Again, what's he doing? He's essentially created something that's an interface to push a button, but it's still the implications, if you play it out, are enormous.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to make people's lives easier. And I think people really appreciate when you make their lives easier. I was just picturing, like, for instance, what if there was a bar or like a coffee shop or something that had up at the bar a Bitcoin vending machine and next to it a Bitcoin soda machine? So like you could maybe put cash in, get some Bitcoins on your phone, and then for the next month or so, you'd be able to like a QR code next to a soda machine and get a soda with your Bitcoins that you just bought. I mean, that would be really cool, and it would provide a way to get around the cash. The soda machine could be much smaller if it operated with something like Bitcoin. So the possibilities are just endless. And especially if it's paired with a quick and easy way for people to get Bitcoins, it even increases it more, especially during the adoption phase where people have trouble getting Bitcoin sometimes.
Adam, do you know if the platform used for this project was something like an Arduino or Raspberry Pi or something like that? I'd be interested in the possibilities of others using embedded microelectronics to do Bitcoin stuff.
Yeah, I don't know the specific hardware that he's working on, but I do know that it is based off of Arduino and that it is an open source platform. And then that's something I'm not sure if his project is fully open source. I'm not clear on that, but he has been developing his initial prototypes on that platform. And it's great because the barrier to entry there to just create something and make sure that it's going to work is so small that, again, you can leverage this. The cost to do it is quite low, even though it's very speculative.
I think that intersection of microelectronics, kind of hacker spaces, and micropayments will be very interesting.
Absolutely. And we've already seen, Morgan's project is certainly an important one, and he's been working on it for a bit longer, I guess, than this other one. But I spoke with Andy Schroeder the other day, who's working on a Bitcoin fluid dispenser, and he has a 20-minute video up that we're going to link in the show notes when I run that interview that essentially shows this entirely portable diesel dispensing system that is based off of this design that he has. You go to a gas station and you want to buy gas. You have two options, generally speaking. You can either put in a credit card or a debit card, and then it'll essentially take money off and increase your bill, and then at the end of it charges you. Or you can go into and talk to the cash register attendant, give them, say, $40 or $20, if whatever you want to put onto it, and go back out and then fill up your car. And then once you're done, if you have change, then you go back in and you get the change. So with this Bitcoin fluid dispenser, say I have an idea of how much I want, and I think it's going to cost me $40 worth of Bitcoin. Well, if I wind up spending $30 worth of Bitcoin in order to get the amount of gas that I wanted to get, then automatically, once my transaction is completed, the remainder is sent back to the same address that it came from. So it's very, very similar to having a cash transaction with the attendant inside, except you have all of the convenience of just doing it at the pump like you would with a credit card. That's something that initially is being applied to fuel, and I think that it has a lot of interesting implications in the world of fuel and fuel dispensing, but it could also be applied to any sort of liquid. You could apply, Stephanie, you mentioned a soda. I was thinking about like a draft beer machine or something like that. Get those big jugs of water, things like that. There's this entire list of things that you can do using this same type of interface.
To our previous conversation, I hope he has the ability to set it to measure in milliliters and liters for internationalization purposes, because quite honestly, no one else in the world understands what on earth you're talking about with these flosses and auses and lubs and gallons. So since you can't get your metric together, I hope he's got an interface in there for the rest of the world who did get their metric together.
I think that's a relatively easy part of the problem to solve.
I really like this idea about the Bitcoin fluid dispenser because it really automates that kind of work. Like, no longer would bartenders have to sit there and fill up a glass of Coke by pressing a button and, potentially pressing the wrong button or whatever and spending their time to do that. It could all just run off of Bitcoin. When you pay a certain amount, you get a certain amount of liquid, and that's making life easier. Hey.
So I think that probably speaks to a broader opportunity here for various types of microelectronic devices that bring Bitcoin into the real world and allow you to do various forms of counting, measuring, or dispensing of fluids, of solids, of discrete units of electricity, or whatever else it might be.
Potentially this could even be a way to make these things cheaper, because when a human being doesn't have to spend their time, i.e. on the clock, dispensing liquids or whatever you're dispensing, then maybe that savings could be passed on to the consumer.
It's a double-edged sword in a world where we increasingly have less service-oriented jobs. And this is something where as we move more and more into an automated future, and certainly that's what Bitcoin as sort of a programmable form of money, as it's recently been called, it sort of leads us to, a lot of these service jobs don't really make sense anymore. So, how do you think that works? Play out the logic for a second.
It's great. It's kind of the age-old problem where, when cars were invented, the people who made horseshoes were upset. There are always going to be jobs for people, and liberating people from jobs that might not be that exciting, like dispensing beer or whatever, that could be a great thing. And it could also make the products cheaper for the consumers. So technology is going to move forward. A lot of jobs are going to be replaced by robotics or automated systems. And that's great, because then we'll be able to pay less for the things that we buy, and people won't have to do those jobs that, frankly, a robot could do. They'll be freed up to do other things.
I think that that's a scary future for people moving forward, though. I understand what you're saying, Stephanie, and this obviously gets off into the weeds from the Bitcoin topics. But that's like a really common concern that people have, is that, yes, you're right in theory, but how long does it take to develop those jobs? You know, I mean, with the way that the world is looking right now, where we have sort of this global financial issue that doesn't really seem like it's going away, and jobs in many places don't seem like they're really coming back.
Don't worry, it's not the Bitcoin pumps that are going to really mess things up. It's actually the ability of Bitcoin to bring in the services of the other 6.5 billion and replace us, the service industries, that are dealing in knowledge work. That's going to be a much bigger effect than replacing physical service businesses with Bitcoin, for sure.
I think it's inevitable that this is going to happen. I mean, manufacturing has been going this way for years, since it began becoming increasingly automated. And yeah, there's pain when people get displaced from manufacturing or potentially service jobs. But the great thing about human beings is they don't just have one skill. They can do all kinds of different things. When one door closes, another one opens. We can find all kinds of different opportunities. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. We just have to find a way to roll with it.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Tucker, Bitcoin enthusiast and host of the upcoming cryptocurrency conference in Atlanta, Georgia, October 5th. We've got a marvelously libertarian-infused day of discussion about what is indisputably the future of money, and you are invited. For those of you who can't attend, we've partnered with Let's Talk Bitcoin to offer video conference passes available for government currency and, of course, Bitcoin. For more information, bitcoinvideopass.com.